Super dupes. Sue has control. I'm also going to open the chat facility in case anybody wants to write.
Sue has control.
I've seen him when I went to. He was talking to John Kent.
Okay, so if everybody can just mute themselves for the moment. Sue's going to
attempt.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Can I have a quick thumbs up if you can all hear me, please? Okay, so thank you all for attending. It's training that we would normally do face to face, but given the state of things in the world at the moment, we're going to do this over Teams, and we are recording it. I'll keep reminding us all of that. We are recording it so that Manningham Housing Organisation will get a copy of this that you can use for training, for further and future training going forward. Can I ask please that you stay muted as much as possible? It just stops feedback, which is a sound that none of us really want in our ears if we can avoid it. Thank you very much. Please remember to be respectful, and if at all possible, can you please put your cameras on? It just helps Lindsay and I immensely when we're delivering training if we can see your faces, because we can kind of judge whether we need to speed up or slow down by reading people's faces. Okay. When you are going to participate, because we're going to ask you to please participate as we go through the morning, so if you can either raise your hand virtually, that'd be wonderful. If you're struggling to raise your hand virtually, then let's just do the old-fashioned way of doing this, and we'll see if we can capture you there. When you're going to speak, you'll have to unmute yourselves, but then please mute yourselves afterwards. Again, breaks. We do have a break planned in for the morning at around about 11ish. We think we're with you till 12:30, so we'll grab a quick break about 11ish. You will get a course pack after the event, so you don't need to write down the things that are on the slides, because what's on the slide and more will be sent out to you in the course pack. But if there's some point that you think is particularly important to yourself, or some question that's been asked, the response to that, they're the kind of things that might be worth noting down. A little word about confidentiality. Quite often on these courses, what happens is people start talking about and sharing about either personal experiences or experiences from families that we're working with. Obviously, any of those personal details must not leave the training room, please. If you are, however, the learning that we get from those may leave. I think it might be worth saying be very careful about what personal details we share, and personal details about service users we share on the grounds that we're recording this. Everyone okay with that? Thank you. It's an emotive subject, is domestic abuse and coercive control. Even for those that have worked in it a long time, there are times when something's said that just kind of gives us a, oh, ouch, that kind of got us moment. By all means, if you're comfortable to stay in the virtual room with us, with your emotions, we're happy for you to be with us with them. But if you do feel that you need a few minutes out just to kind of gather your thoughts, please feel free to do so. So the things that we're going to cover today, we're going to look at what domestic abuse is and what coercive control is. And we're going to look at why we're putting so much importance on, during training at the moment, we're putting an awful lot of importance and emphasis on coercive control. And we're going to look at why we're doing that. We're going to look at some of the patterns of controlling behaviour and the risks associated with it. And you will also, by the end of the session, have a good knowledge of local support services. Is somebody trying to come in at the moment? Have you just forgotten to mute?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm just trying to see. I think I've muted everybody again.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, no. So, introductions and welcome. I'm Sue Roberts, currently working with my colleague, who will introduce herself in a moment, for Bradford Council, and we are in the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence team, and we are the trainers for that team. Previously, I've worked as a direct support worker for lots of years in various domestic abuse support services throughout the district. Lindsay, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Bridge. I will be co-delivering today with Sue, work for the same team, domestic abuse and sexual violence team at Bradford Council, and again been around for a lot of years in the field of domestic abuse.
Thank you. Would you all like to just, Pafula, does everybody that's here know everybody else?
Yes, everybody knows everybody.
Okay, so shall we skip introductions from you? Would you like to do a little bit of an introduction, Pafula, and explain why we're here today?
I'm Manningham's domestic violence champion, and after the last training we had with Alta team, I thought it would be interesting for all the staff members to learn a bit more and to see what signs there are, and I think that's what we're trying to do here today.
Okay. Thank you. So welcome everybody. Let's I think it's over to you, Lindsay, now.
That's cool. Yeah, I can take control of that. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go straight into this session by looking at the definition of domestic abuse and sexual violence. So you may or may not be aware that we had a new piece of legislation this year. The Domestic Abuse Act came out at the end of April just this year in 2021, and it's made a few changes to the definition. So we're going to start with that. We're not going to go through it word for word. We're just going to pick out some of the key words that we think will be useful for today. So what we're looking at is domestic abuse, which is of course any incident, because any incident is worthy of either contacting a support service or contacting the police. But what we're going to really concentrate on today is patterns of incidents or patterns of behaviour. And of course, that's all sorts of behaviour, whatever that may be. It could be threatening, it could be violence, it could be coercion, it could be control. But what we know that for it to be classed as under the domestic abuse definition, somebody's got to be 16 or over. So you need to be over 16, otherwise you're protected by child protection. It also doesn't matter what gender or sexuality you are, domestic abuse can affect absolutely everyone. And what we know is that there is still quite a high statistic of females being victimised by this, but really we have to say the amount of male victims is really climbing now. So what we would say is, for it to be classed as domestic abuse, then it needs to be between people that have either been in an intimate relationship or they are in an intimate relationship, or they're family members. Now, most of us forget about the whole family member thing, so we might need to consider that when we're talking to our service users. Who else is involved? Are in-laws involved, for instance? And then, of course, it talks about all the usual stuff, which if I'd have said to you today, tell me, define domestic abuse, then you'd have probably come up with those words, which should have been physical, sexual, maybe threatening behaviour, controlling behaviour. And you'd have probably talked about psychological and emotional abuse as well. We're going to try and unpick a little bit of that today. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of little points. So first of all, economic abuse. This new Act of Parliament this year has really put a focus on economic and financial abuse. And we're seeing this as really, really growing. And I'm sure that, you know, it's something that you're all aware of here. But what it really means is, how do we stop somebody or prevent somebody from being able to just acquire or attain or keep their own finances or economic control? And it can be done in a number of ways, and we'll have a look at that in a minute or two. And again, we've got to think about how that's often exacerbated by perhaps the benefit system, where we know that everything goes into one name now. So it can be made quite difficult. So we'll have a little think about that. We're also going to really concentrate on controlling behaviour. And this is really got to be our top trump card, we think, from today. We often think that violence is the key thing. We've got to be looking for injuries. We've got to be looking for any kind of signs of violence. And what we're going to really try and get you to think about today is we want you to look at controlling behaviour. So first of all, there it says that controlling behaviour is a range of acts that's designed. So if I just said to you today, what does the word design mean to you? What kind of things would you say back to me? You can unmute if you want, or you can pop something in the chat facility. I think the chat facility is open. So what would you say? Oh, somebody else is coming in now. Hang on. Yeah, just talk to me. Just unmute and talk to me. Is that you, Faisal?
I think Harry's beat me to it. It was going to be premeditated or pre-planned, something that's as a starting point and an end, I guess, or a indefinite sort of period of time to use or abuse that person for their own gain or for their own reasons.
Brilliant. Yeah. So I think that's really good. So it's about being pre-planned. It's about maybe being open-ended, you know, designed and always stop and finish, does it, with just one thing. It can be tweaked. So that's really, really good. It's thought out beforehand. Yeah. Anything else when you think about design? Yeah.
Yeah, Lindsay, I think it's about taking control over that person. So you're looking for their weaknesses, I guess, and trying to capitalize on the other person's weakness, whether that's you know, sort of vulnerability, or whether that's economic. Sort of they've got the money, they've got the cash, and you know, you can sort of manipulate them, I guess. So it's exerting your own power upon someone else who's potentially weaker than you in different sort of personality traits, I guess.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. It's great. I think somebody else had the hand up, but they might have changed their mind. Yeah, so I like this idea of it being tailored then as well. So it's about how would you tailor your design? If you were designing something, it's for someone, isn't it? You've got somebody in mind. So if we think about that to start with, what we're going to say from here on in then today is that forever now, we're never going to make excuses up for why abusers do as they do. We're never going to say ever again, oh, I wonder if they've had a really bad childhood. I wonder if they've just had like a really hard time. I wonder if it's because they're drunk. I wonder if it's just because they're really stressed out. We're never going to say that ever again, because what we've just talked about is this person pre-planning, thinking through and designing how they're going to behave to control someone. So what we're talking about is a fully functional human being here, aren't we? We're not talking about somebody who's got some kind of strange illness that makes them an abuser. So we'll delve a bit deeper into that later, but then it talks about how they do that, and we've sort of touched on that already. So they might use isolation, they might use exploitation, they might use deprivation, they might deprive somebody of their needs. But the last line in this paragraph says regulating their everyday behaviour, and that's what we would really want you to think about. So control is about regulating somebody's everyday behaviour, just how they act. Now, if I'd have said to you 2 years ago, right, next year everybody's going to be working from home, they've got to be wearing a mask, you won't be able to see your loved ones, You'll only be allowed out for an hour a day. And the only way that you're going to get to see your very, very poorly people is if they're at end of life care. If I'd have said that to you 2 years ago, you'd have said, don't be ridiculous, Lindsay. You are off your rocker. But actually, we've all had our everyday behaviour regulated to such an extent over the last 18 months that we never thought possible. So it's quite easy to do, because we'll all do what we think is best for everybody else. And basically that's what controlling behaviour is. The person who's in control will tailor it to the needs of the person who they're trying to control. And the person who's being controlled will accept that control because they need to protect other people. Otherwise there are consequences. And that's when we look at coercive behaviour. So coercive behaviour works extremely well with controlling behaviour because it's, again, what's used to punish, harm or frighten somebody. So it can be a range of acts, it can be all sorts of ways of doing it. But if you do not do as you're told, so if you do not relinquish to my control, then there will either be a harm, a punishment or some sort of fear involved. So there'll be a consequence to not doing as you're told. So that's a little bit how that works. We will just quickly go through the sexual violence stuff as well. So finally, 2021, we've actually got a separate bit for sexual violence at last. And of course, this talks about anything, any type of act or any type of attempt to obtain a sexual act that somebody doesn't want. So it's very, very subjective, is this. So what could be okay for one person is not okay for another. So you absolutely have to check out the onus is on the person doing the act. You have to absolutely check out whether this is okay for you to do it. Now, again, it talks about using coercion, blackmail, psychological intimidation, force. It talks about threats, maybe of, you know, you won't get that job, you won't get that grade, or perhaps physical harm if you don't do this. But the key bit here is about consent. Now, we are all aware that people cannot give consent when they're either mentally incapacitated, if they're asleep, if they're drugged, if they're intoxicated. We're aware of that. What we are also going to say to you today is that there is nothing more incapacitating than fear. Therefore, we need to make sure that people understand consent and that they're not just saying yes because they thought they had to. Now, it's a massive one and it could be a course in its own right, could this, but we really haven't got the time and space to go through it. But I will ask you one question and it's rhetorical. I want you to think about it yourself. If I said to you all today in this room, do you understand consent? Do you think you'd all be able to say, yes, I understand consent? Wholeheartedly, I absolutely understand consent. And you might say, yeah. But if I then said to you, okay, do you think the rest of your family understands consent? Would you then be thinking, oh, I'm not sure? Because it means different things for different age groups and I'm not sure whether they understand. So our thought to you today is to think about the people that you're serving out there. They're very unlikely to understand fully what consent means. They're very unlikely to understand what coercive and controlling behaviour means. So if you're asking them whether they're experiencing domestic violence, they're very likely to say no, because they won't be. But they might well be experiencing controlling behaviour. So there's something about the way we word things as well, and then maybe go out and give a bit of education on this is now a crime, controlling behaviour. Right, my folks, thank you for listening to that little bit. I'm going to get you involved now. So we're going to have a little think about what controlling behaviour looks like and what we might be seeing. And we're going to have a look at some patterns of controlling behaviour. So what's going to happen now is you're going to have some headings that will appear on the screen. And I'm going to ask you to either shout out or put in the chat facility what you think this is. So the first heading is isolation, and I'm going to ask you, how do you isolate someone? So you tell me. You can just shout out, or you can put in the chat facility, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Okay, I think I've got some hands up, but I can't always see who's got the hand up. Prafula, please say.
Stop seeing family and friends.
Yeah, okay. So it's all right saying stop seeing family and friends, but how are you actually going to do that? And I'm not asking you personally. I think somebody else has got the hand up. It doesn't actually show me who they are, which is terrible.
Yeah, it's me, Mansha.
Hello.
I think it's taking away the liberties.
Yeah.
That's another way of doing it as well. You see, taking everything away from you. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. Taking all the liberties.
So that is very, and again, we've kind of done that. We've all had a flavour of that, haven't we, over the last 18 months? You can't do this. You can't do that. Yeah, and I'm thinking there's some good ones here, like Desert Island. Yeah, absolutely. Take somebody away. Stop them from working. How would you do that? What would be the techniques, do you think? Maybe sticking them in a room, telling them to stay there. That's absolutely stay there. Out and out abuse, isn't it? You can't move. Tying them up, putting them in the cellar, not listening to what they say. Absolutely, yeah. Stopping them from education, taking the keys away. Yes, it can be kind of really extreme to really more subtle stuff, can't it? Oh, I've just forgot. I took the keys with me today and I've locked you in. No money, absolutely. So now you're talking, or maybe force them into working as well. So you're going to work, you're absolutely shattered, you're coming home, you're doing nothing else. Locking somebody in again, yes. And the more subtle ways of doing that might just be every time your family comes round or your friends come round, then your partner or whoever is the abuser is just really rude. They're just really rude to your family members. So your family members stop coming. Or they tell lies about you. Brilliant, yeah, and you've got change in the locks as well. Great stuff. So that's some ways of isolation. Let's have a little look at some other techniques then. What about this one? So what about enforcing a trivial demand? What about saying these are the standards that we have to keep in this house? So what kind of things would you be allowed to do or not allowed to do? What things do you need to do? Like, oh, before I go out, I'll have to make sure that the bathroom's clean to this standard or whatever. What kind of things might be involved in this, do you think? It's a bit more difficult. And I would say it's probably like the standards that you set for your own house, maybe. So you've got to have your Sunday dinner at 5:05 on a Sunday. And there's got to be 3 Yorkshire puddings on everybody's plate. Yeah, always finding fault, absolutely, yeah. I'm told Her Majesty the Queen is guilty of this. Is she really? What, as enforced trivial demands? You think she's got to, like, she might be, you know, we all have them. We all have trivial demands. So what's important to you might not be important to me. I don't care if you don't iron pillowcases. But I know there might be some people in this room that iron pillowcases. I'm all right with that. That's fine. Stop wasting your life on ironing pillowcases. No, honestly, it's yours. It's your thing. So you get on with it. Yeah, so never happy, being highly critical all the time. Yeah. So if I've got a standard in my house and you come and live with me, what's going to happen? Being made to clean over and over again, follow strict routines, might seem really unreasonable or rigid standards. Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that we probably all do, but we don't make our other person do it. So it might be, I quite like a clean bathroom, so I always clean the bathroom. Although my husband can clean the bathroom, he doesn't do it as well as I do. Likewise, I don't make the bed because I can't do it as well as he can. So therefore, that's okay. You kind of each have your standard and you each carry on. It's when the other person is saying absolutely not, you need to come and clean this bathroom because you've made a mess of it. And you stand there watching them. There's a consequence if this doesn't happen right. Could absolutely be brainwashing the kids as well, Sajid. That's really good, because it might be about saying, let's watch Daddy try and cook this dinner, shall we? Oh, let's see what sort of a state they make of it. Yeah, all of that. Let's make fun of Dad because he can't iron his own shirt. Or let's make fun of Mum because of what she's wearing. Any of that. Yeah, absolutely. So let's have a look at the next one. What threats do we think abusers use? Sorry, I'm just going to turn that off. I didn't know that one on silent. What kind of threats? These are really kind of straightforward. What threats would you use?
I'm going to leave you.
Yes. Now, why is that so scary?
Because the person might not have lived independently or might have become reliant on the partner financially.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So the threat to leave, yeah, you don't love me, I don't love you, mind games, any of that. It could be that, you know, it could be really, really a bit more extreme, where it could be threats to kill, threats to harm pets, threats to harm other family members. Now, the threat is important because we need to understand what it is that's keeping somebody there. What is it that they're really frightened of? And this is where you have those conversations with people. And we'll talk about that in a little while. But you can be thinking about, you know, what's the worst thing that could really happen, do you think? What's the worst thing that could happen to you in this relationship? And talking through that. Yeah, absolutely. Mind games. You could be saying, I'm going to deport you. Yeah, brilliant. Accusations. Look at you. Who have you been talking to? That sort of thing. Divorce. Yeah, any kind of threats that's really personal, that's making you think, I don't want that to happen. It could be actually used. Yeah, there could be some threats of violence there, using weapons. Brilliant. Could be using weapons on somebody else. But now you've seen it, you've seen the threat happen. Threatening to get a second wife. Absolutely. Yep, court allegations, it's all coming up now. Yeah. Denying the access to children, threatening to take the kids. Yeah, or a third wife. Flipping it, you've got to have your hands full there. But yeah, a third wife even. Okay. Next one, degradation. How do abusers control and degrade? How do they degrade and humiliate? What might they do? Somebody's put Pretty Patel there. Oh, okay. Yeah, right. Moving swiftly on. Let's have a think about how you might degrade and humiliate somebody.
Always making fun of them.
Yes, absolutely.
Jokes, which obviously saying things around you that upset somebody.
Yeah. Do you mean like we've just done about Priti Patel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's out there, isn't it? It's dead easy. It's dead easy to social media as well. That, yeah, constant banter. Oh, look at state of you. You're not wearing that, are you? Oh, flipping it. Look at state of your hair. Yeah, all that. Oh, look how big your belly is. Look how, yeah, big your bum is. Whatever it is. Absolutely. So you've got a lot going on, and it can be, yeah, the sarcasm, but it can be really degrading, can that stuff? Brilliant. Thank you. So this is happening in your relationship. You've had enough. You can't bear it anymore. You think about leaving, and then this happens. An occasional indulgence. So these are the nice things that the partner will do or say just to remind you of the person that you fell in love with. So what might they do now? Like, oh, remember when we were like really happy? Oh yeah, buying you expensive gifts like they used to do at the beginning. Yeah, what else? What might they say? Yeah, compliments. You look lovely, you look really nice. Take them on holiday, absolutely. Yeah, always a big one. Oh, look how much I've done for you. Aren't we lovely? Aren't we happy? Oh, she might get a bag of chips. You've had me at chips, Gary. Yeah, sold for a bag of chips. This is really good. So start the waterworks, so start crying. Show her like, oh, you know, I'm so sad. I'm so sorry. I can't believe what I've done. Let's make things better. Let's change. Yes, let's have another baby. Let's make everything wonderful. So what does this do you think, to the person, to the victim? What does it do to them?
Gives them a bit of a false hope that things might be better now.
Yeah. And that false hope, whatever it is, hope is such a huge thing. It's all that you need. So yes, it absolutely confuses them. It gives them a false hope. They will think about forgiving because everything's lovely now. Yes, that lack of emotional energy, you might start to feel like, oh, I can actually just relax a bit now because things are good, things are lovely. And it might make you feel guilty because you were thinking about leaving. Yeah, does prevent the victim from taking the right decisions, absolutely. So the reason why we're telling you this is because this will happen in cycles of abuse all the time. If you're working with this person and you think, okay, things are going well, it looks like, you know, they're going to be leaving this relationship, or they've come to be with us, they've come to stay in our housing, all is well, they've left the relationship. But then partner pops up with occasional indulgence, then they're really not going to want to see you or talk to you or do anything about moving on out of this relationship. And we're saying to you, please don't take it personally. Just kind of step back for a minute, wait for this to pass, because bad things are coming again. Okay? It's just recognizing the power of the occasional indulgence. A display of total power is something that might happen just after or just before an occasional indulgence. And it's about how the abuser demonstrates that they are definitely in control. So I wonder what things they might do here. How would you demonstrate that you are definitely in control? What would you do?
show authority.
Yes. So, yes, make them fear you, show authority. Absolutely. It works better, I think, when we're face to face, because I can do this right well in a training room. I can be right authoritative in a training room. But it's not as easy as this, because you could just switch me off, can't you? You can't run away when I'm in a training room with you. But yes, any of that kind of making somebody fear you. What often happens, yeah, take away finances again, brilliant, yeah. What often happens here is it could be a really big display. It might only happen once in the relationship, but it's the time when you were so frightened that you will never step out of line again because you know what could happen. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. There's a couple more, but I will just explain them and then we can move on because we've not got loads of time today. This one just says exhaustion, and it just says how a victim's kept exhausted. And what we are aware of here is that victims are actually experiencing a post-traumatic stress disorder at this point. So they're at that point where they're walking on eggshells. They're at that point where they're trying to preempt what's going to happen next. And it's very, very exhausting, mentally and physically. We know that the hormones that are in the body are hormones that shouldn't be there all the time. So you've got things being released into your body like adrenaline, like cortisol, that really shouldn't be there all the time. And that makes you exhausted, it makes you shattered. So you end up here, which is a distorted perspective, or sometimes called a distorted reality. And what happens is the controller or the abuser will make excuses to justify their behaviour, and the victim will, by that, they will also be telling you these excuses. Oh, it only happens because of this, it only happens when, you know, it's not that bad really. They'll really sort of try and minimise the situation. And that's because they're having to live in that distorted reality. That's where they're at now. They're not the person they once were. They've been made to think differently, and they've been made to take on responsibility for what's happening. And this is where you're meeting them sometimes. You will be meeting them in this distorted reality. And it's hard because you want to say, shake your head, sort yourself out, just get up and leave. And you need to just go, hang on a minute, I wonder what this person's life is really like. So we're going to just explain to you something about these headings and where this research has come from, which might make you think differently. So first of all, the headings that we've used today come from a piece of research that's really quite old. It was in the 1950s. A guy called Professor Biderman did a piece of research just after the Korean War. And he did his piece of research on a group of American soldiers who'd been taken prisoner of war. And he said, you know what, I can't understand how this highly trained, highly skilled group of men were taken prisoner of war, and within a very short space of time, they learned to be submissive and collaborative with their captors. And they did this because their lives were in danger. And so Biderman said, I can't understand why, you know, sometimes the prison gates were left open, the prison guards left them, but they still didn't escape. Why not? So Biderman said, right, what was it that happened to them to allow this to happen? And he talked about those 8 headings that we've just used. And he said, this is what happened. It was a process. They were isolated. Then they were forced to do stupid things like you are when you're a prisoner of war. So your clothes are taken away from you. Often your head is shaved. You've got very little food. You don't often have a warm bed to sleep in. Then you are threatened if you step out of line. and that threat could be really real. So somebody might be killed in front of you for stepping out of line. Therefore, you know not to do that again. And he said sometimes they use these little occasional indulgences with the prisoners as well. And they'd say, right, I tell you what, you can have a bit more food today, and you can have another blanket, and you can have a bath, or you can have a shower. But what I need you to do now is keep your eye on arrested prisoners. Just make sure they don't step out of line. And it was a very sort of clever technique, and Biderman was the first person that came up with the term brainwashing. And he said, you know, this is really weird. It was almost like in a very short space of time, and he's talking a week, they were doing as they were told. That were that. So what's it got to do with domestic abuse, you ask me? So a good few years later, a woman called Diana Russell wrote a book in the 1980s, and she was talking about a group of women. And she was saying, okay, we've got women here that are in very abusive relationships, so much so that they've been raped in the marriage. Because it used to be legal to rape somebody in the marriage. Yeah, it wasn't until 1991 that we made that a crime. So Russell said, right, what I don't understand is why are they staying? Why don't they just get out? What the heck is going on? And she came up with the techniques that were used on these women. And like any good researcher, she looked to see if anybody else had done any work on this. And the only thing that she could find that matched her work was the work of Biderman. Biderman were talking about prisoners of war, and she were talking about women who live on your street. How can that be right? But it was right. And what Biderman said was it's dead easy. The easiest way to control somebody is to use the 3D effect. So you use dependency, debility, and dread. You make them dependent, you debilitate them, and you make them think that their life is in your hands. And then Diana Russell said, yeah, this can easily be applied to the tactics used by abusive partners. So that's quite tough, isn't it? Because what we're saying is, maybe if somebody walked into your organisation today that had been a prisoner of war, then I'm really confident that you would treat them with a lot of respect and dignity, and that you would expect there to be quite a long recovery time for this person to be able to function in daily life. But I don't think we treat anybody else like that who's been in an abusive relationship. And I think we kind of have a bit of a set of rules for those people to go and sort themselves out. So we might really need to think about how we are working with people that have been through very, very similar psychological coercion. So, little look at what it looks like in a conceptual way. So the abuser has to get and then keep power and control. That's their whole purpose in life. And the way they do that is they use the headings in the little spokes of the wheel here that we've looked at today. And if they don't work, then they've got an outer rim that they could use, which is often physical violence, sexual violence, or economic control. But generally, this control can go on without any violence for a long, long time. Right, guys, what do you think of that? I'm going to stop for breaths right there. Yes, Gary, good question. So when we looked at Biderman, so although his piece of research is quite old, it's still on the Amnesty International website because it's such a huge piece of research. They also then looked at the Stockholm Syndrome, which came much later, as you'll be aware, was in the 1970s. And the Stockholm Syndrome said, yeah, there were a group of people who were taken hostage, and within sort of 3 or 4 days they did as they were told. But then they were so brainwashed, and similarly with Biderman's people as well. When it was time for them to be released, they said, I'm not going because this is how I think things should be now, and I've been brainwashed to such an extent that I think these people are right. So yes, there is a little bit of a Stockholm Syndrome involved in it. It's always about thinking of what is somebody's safest option, basically. What will they do to keep themselves safe? What will they do to keep themselves alive? And we would all do the same thing because we're all from the same human race. So no matter what happened to us, whether we were in an abusive relationship when we were children, whether we were in an abusive relationship when we were adults, or whether we were taken prisoner of war, we'd all act in very similar ways to keep alive. That's how we work as humans. There's nothing special about it. But what we often do is go straight to the victim and go, why did you stay? That's what we all do. Instead of going to perpetrator and going, why would you do something like that to another human being? Yeah. So any thoughts, comments, questions on what we've done so far? Yeah, absolutely, low self-esteem. Not only low self-esteem, but that idea of thinking, how do I even get out of this? Who's going to help me? Who's going to even want to know? Because all they're interested in is, why did I stay? Yeah. Right, folks, so I'm going to have a quick comparison with the headings that we've just looked at from Professor Biderman, and also a very, very new piece of research, which is fairly up to date. So Biderman did the chart of coercion in 1953, as we've just looked at. Evan Stark, new guy in town, did his piece of work on coercive control, on people in abusive relationships. Evan Stark is a forensic social worker from America. He's a super duper guy. There's loads of information in your packs about him. But he did his piece of work in 2015. So can you see the similarities between his work and Biderman's work? Even though, again, Stark was talking about families that lived on your street. So a couple of things that he's kind of brought up to date, and we're just going to, excuse me, we're just going to quickly go through those before we go on to the next bit. He talks about things like surveillance, does Stark. So how up to date are we now with this? Here we are on surveillance, guys. This is where we're at. We're in the 21st century. We're talking about spyware that's at your fingertips. We're talking about stuff that I used to see only in a James Bond movie. Now I'm holding it in my hand. Yeah, I can basically track anyone I want, wherever I want. What we've also got is a number of devices that are in people's homes, and we need to be very, very aware of these if we are working in the community. So if you have anybody who's working in the community who's going to a home that's got either a doorbell, camera, or a Google Home, or an Alexa, or anything else, I won't say a name out loud in case she sets yours off at home, but any of those devices, then you might need to think about asking that person to switch them off before you have a confidential conversation, because you might not be having a confidential conversation. Yeah, Nadine, just a really good question, actually. Do army training use these techniques? Interestingly, what they do is they say, this is what's going to happen to you if you're taken prisoner of war. This is what's going to happen to you. So therefore, how do you sort of get away from this? Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Okay, so just a few things there on surveillance that Stark really wanted us to be aware of, and that I've probably never been in a situation where it's easier to spy on people. It terrifies me. Another little point on gaslighting. Have you all heard of this term now? It's been around for a long time, but we've sort of brought it back into common parlance today. So gaslighting is really making somebody feel like they're going crazy. It can be any form of mental abuse, really. It can be, don't be ridiculous, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, to that banter thing of, I'm only kidding, I'm only joking. But also that thing of, I don't think you've got that right. I think you're imagining that. Yeah, so a lot of that going on. And this is way, way old. This is from a play from 1938. And it was made into a movie in the 1940s. And what the guy did there, he was trying to get control over his female partner. And he acquired the house next door, and he fiddled with the gas lights, which made the gas lights dim in her house. And then she'd be saying there's something wrong with the lights, and he'd be going, no, there isn't, you're just imagining it. There's nothing wrong with the lights. And the film is called Gaslight. And that's where it comes from, Gary West. So, 1938 play, 1944 film, get it on Netflix. It's got Ingrid Bergman in it. What more do you want on a Sunday afternoon? So have a look at it. It talks about all these techniques. Nothing new, but we've rediscovered the term again. One of the other things which is new is cloud lighting, which is gaslighting on social media. We've talked about this very much today. But I would be very aware personally of what you are liking. So what is it that you are pressing a like to? Is it something that is funny, or is it something that is making fun of somebody else? And if it is, be aware of whether you are entering into some sort of cloud lighting thing, because we all get involved in that. So that's just a few of the things that Stark wanted us to be aware of. And I'm going to, I think, pass on to Sue right now.
Thank you, everybody. So at that point, does anyone have any questions? I just think you've been really, really good people at putting questions and things in the chat as we've gone along, which is really helpful for both Lindsay and I. So thank you for that. So what if, and we often get this, we hear this, and when I worked at Women's Aid, this was probably one of the most common comments made by somebody when I first answered the phone to them. They'd be saying, I don't know if you can help me because... I'm trying to make the screen move along and it's not moving. Why is it not moving? Is it moving for you?
Yeah, it's moving now.
Okay, thank you. Because they've never hit me, or they don't hit me often, or they don't hit me much, or they haven't hit me for ages. And our thought behind that would be, is that because they don't need to do? Yeah, for some reason it's not being very kind. There we go. Is someone not hitting you or using physical violence because they don't need to? And is that because their coercive control is so good? So as Lindsay's already said, coercive control was a phrase picked up by Evan Stark in 2015 and really brought to the forefront of research and work around domestic abuse. So much so that we now have new legislation of coercive control, which we'll go on and look at in a short while. So what does Evan Stark say? Evan Stark says coercive control is the perpetrator establishing in the mind of the victim the price of their resistance. I'm just going to let that sink in for a moment because it's quite wordy, is that? But basically what he's saying is, if I am good enough at coercive control, the person that I'm using it with gets to the point where they don't even think of offering up any resistance because the consequence to that is too big. And what we'd like to do with you to just start thinking about coercive control a little bit more is to listen to two young men, Luke and Ryan Hart, as they talk to us about their experience of coercive control at the hands of their father. So.
Yeah, I'm going to just stop sharing that and try and share something else with you now. Actually, stop doing that. And just share this little movie clip with you. And it's there. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You know what I've done, don't you? Oh, you've seen all my...
Forgot the sound button.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I see. It's interesting this because it sort of does a different thing when you're recording. Right, this time should work. Oh, technology, it's smooth.
There are calls for a major campaign to raise awareness of coercive control following the case of Lance Hart, who shot and killed his wife Claire and daughter Charlotte after he had inflicted years of psychological abuse.
Lance Hart also took his own life on that day in July 2016. We can talk now to the family's surviving sons, Luke and Ryan. Good morning, to you both. I'm going to ask, first of all, how are you?
We're actually doing quite well. We've been quite busy raising awareness this week, so we're quite tired, but it's been a productive week.
And Luke, why do you think, I mean, you have such a powerful story to tell. Why do you think it is important to tell this now? Because for 3 years, I think 3 years ago, the laws on coercive control were introduced, and that was the case of you and your family.
That's right. So we had actually only moved our mother and sister away from our father 5 days before he killed them both. We found out on the news app, where we both work in different countries, what had happened. And the first thing that struck us was just confusion, because our father had never been violent towards us. And then the violence seemed to come out of nowhere. He seemed to kill our mother and sister out of nowhere, because we'd always thought domestic abuse was about violence. But it's only since we were in the police station in Spalding, we looked up behind us, and 6 months before the coercive control legislation came out, and we saw financial abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, all the other mechanisms our father used to control our family. And at that moment, we realised our father's behaviour didn't come out of nowhere. He'd controlled us our entire lives, and that control had ratcheted up until he killed our mother and sister. And when you consider murder to be the ultimate act of control, suddenly what seemed to come out of nowhere made perfect sense to us, and that's what we're hoping to raise awareness of.
Ryan, one of the things that I know you've talked about already is the notion from the outside looking in, there were no signs, effectively, as to what was happening within the household. Can you give people a sense of the kind of thing you were witnessing, but maybe didn't realise at the time?
Yeah, so I think what is key is to understand that coercive control isn't so much what is done to you, but what you cannot do yourself. So our father slowly took away our freedoms. So for one, he kept us financially poor. He wasted and gambled money, so we had no money to spend. And he used that as an excuse why we couldn't go and see friends, why we couldn't take part in sports. And over time, we ended up restricting our own social lives because we felt we couldn't actually take part in friendships and society. And over the decades of that slow abuse, we ended up controlling ourselves and limiting our life. And the reason we moved our mum and sister away from the family home wasn't because we were scared our father would kill them, but because we were scared they could never live when they were in the home with him.
And you'd left home by this point?
We had left home, yeah, as Luke said, only 5 days before he killed them. But we found out in the police investigation he was planning on killing all of us for months before we even planned to move out, because that control over our lives, he could see that slowly disappearing because we were able to provide financially for mum and our sister.
It's for anyone watching who may be in this situation, and like you two didn't really know you were in a coercive, abusive relationship.
Yeah.
There are little things that happen. I mean, you've mentioned a couple. There was an incident I read about, or a form of routine, your daily tea at 4:15 instead of 4:30. Can you explain
Well,
that?
yeah, so our father almost created a whole system of laws in the house that we had to abide by. And they were designed so we could never meet them. So we always had an excuse to basically just yell at us. So the bus always got in at 4:30, but our father from school, right, and our father always cooked dinner for 4:15. So he either burnt it and then blamed us when we turned up and the food was black, or he'd put it on the plate, ate his, ours was cold, and he would yell at us. And we just couldn't make the bus get there any earlier. But it was those small things where eventually you begin to believe you're the problem because you're always doing something wrong. You're always to blame. All these things are happening that are your fault. And that's what the abuser tells you.
But you were high achievers at school as well, weren't you? You did really well in school. So, and the point being that perhaps teachers, and I'm not passing any criticism onto the education system in this sense, but it wasn't something to look at. You weren't going to be considered as problem children.
Yeah, so that's one key issue we want to raise, is a stereotype of an abuser is not necessarily someone who's violent, who creates those physical scars and bruises. And also, as pupils, we weren't the snapping, like detention pupils. We were overly compliant and quiet and highly successful, not out of determination, but because we were afraid of failure. And that comes from our home environment where we could not fail at home. That wasn't an option. And so in our school life, we were those same kids who just got our heads down and worked hard because we had no other option. And I think what is key is we need to change the stereotypes we're looking out for in abusers and also victims. Not all victims are going to be aggressive. They might be if they're responding to physical attacks, but our environment was cultivated over decades. So we slowly accustomed and adapted to be able to survive. And so we became, as you said, overly compliant and fearful. And that made us safe at home. And that necessarily didn't show itself in school in the stereotypical ways.
I mean, you've both been very brave and very honest. And you know, the way you tell the story of what happened will be impacting. I just wonder what, I'm assuming that a lot of people have responded, have they? Because as you say right at the beginning, you wouldn't know from the outside. If this is happening in a household, as it was in yours, you may well not know. These could be the people living next door to you. They could be members of your own family. You just wouldn't know.
And that's the thing, is we lived with a murderer for 25 years and didn't know. The services to our family didn't know. Our friends to our family didn't know. Because I think when we talk about domestic abuse, we talk about violence, but domestic abuse is about control. Violence is what abusers use to get control. It's a subset of control. And when you take a step back and talk about control, it all makes sense. And I think that's one of the messages we'd like to convey, is that in the media as well, sometimes the media are part of society, they assume abusers are violent men who are angry, who've lost it, and they're violent out of anger and emotion. But our father was cold-blooded. It was calculated. It was based on beliefs and control.
Can I ask one thing, is that if someone is in that circumstance, and there will be people listening to this even now thinking, I hear some of the things you're saying correspond with our lives. They might be thinking, what do? Do I go and see? I go to the police and I say, do you know what, my dad or whoever it is in the family is stopping us from doing things sometimes. And in their head they might be thinking, it just doesn't sound like much. You know, it was an enormous thing, but they might be wary of thinking, it just sounds like we're not, you know, what's the problem?
I think we would encourage anyone with any concerns, not only in themselves but in their friends, to call the National Domestic Violence Helpline and just express what you've seen. Because by saying it's not that bad, that's what we said our entire lives, it's not that bad. We kept thinking our lives could be worse. And that's not how people should be living, by thinking it could be worse. We all deserve to live freely and happily. And I think if you are seeing some of those elements that we talk about, talk to the experts and raise your concerns, and don't just live and give in to that life that you may have ended up in.
And also one thing in our case is when women leave, that's when they're most likely to be killed by their partners. So we didn't realise. And actually, if you think you're being abused, don't suddenly leave, because that can trigger that loss of control in the men. They feel that you're leaving as a rebuttal to their control, and that can make you in quite danger.
There's a great fear to for anyone who is watching who wants to make their situation known of the consequences, but also life after. How long has it taken for you to kind of get to this very composed and compassionate place?
So I think what was key for us was when we lost Mum and Charlotte, we lost our purpose in life. And it wasn't until we started speaking out about a year and a half after the murders that we started to find new meaning. And we started to, I guess, make something good out of what happened. We didn't want our father to win, essentially. Had we just lived a life of regret and sadness, he would have essentially won in destroying our lives too. So what we try to do is live a life which is meaningful, that Mum and Charlotte would be proud of. And I think part of that is speaking out about what we've suffered to hopefully raise awareness. Part of that is how we wrote our own book, Operation Lighthouse, to share our story more widely. And we hope to just go into schools maybe one day, just talk to anyone who's willing to listen to us, so we can do what we can to hopefully make sure our story isn't repeated again.
Well, I'm sure I speak on behalf of a lot of people watching you, amazed by your composure. And, you know, it's quite remarkable how you tell your story. It will impact on a lot of people.
I think you've helped someone today. You must have done.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
If you've been affected.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Go back
Do you
to the
want to just sort of ask?
Well, while Lindsay's popping the presentation back on the screen, are there any questions or comments about the what we heard there from Luke and Ryan? Just a couple of points I'd like to pick up on that I think are worth kind of revisiting, are that the phrase violence is a subset of control. Because I do think it's something that we do. I do think we very much focus on violence rather than control. And I think it will help us to spot things that are going on if we can look at control rather than the violence. And I think the other thing that kind of struck a chord with me, and does every time I hear it, is that they talk about how as children they were probably overly compliant at school. So there's those children that almost look as though they're behaving too well. Any comments? Okay. So Lindsay's already spoken about the work and research that Evan Stark has done around coercive control. But we also, in 2015 and in 2016, have some research done by a woman called Dr. Jane Monckton-Smith. And her research has really kind of come into the domestic abuse and coercive control field and given it a real shake-up. What Jane Monckton-Smith did was she looked at domestic homicide reviews to see if she could see a common theme throughout them. And the common theme that she saw was coercive control. And putting her research in a nutshell, she says that coercive control predicts homicide more effectively than violence by 6 times. So if we needed any further reasons for why we should be looking at coercive control rather than homicide, rather than violence, this is it. Okay. She wrote a book. She's done a research paper, which is 1, expensive and 2, quite heavy. But then she also followed that up with a book, which is a really easy read. It's hard to read because it has in there some case studies from real life. But the way it's written in a nice, easy manner. I'm trying to get me, I'll try it this way, see if that moves it on. What we find looking at our local DHRs is that they echo the findings that Jane Monckton-Smith talks about in a book from national DHRs, in that if someone's leaving or has recently left, they really are at high risk of further incidents of either coercive control, where we see increased stalking behaviour, or of physical attacks, or even being killed. And what we tend to do, findings from local and national DHR is that what we tend to do is focus on violence rather than coercive control, and that we tend to focus on the victim and almost put the onus on the victim to keep themselves safe rather than looking at the perpetrator and what services should be doing really to tackle the perpetrator. However, in 2015, we got a new piece of legislation. Well, we got a new, there was a subsection 76 from the Serious Crime Act, and it talks about a new offence of coercive and controlling behaviour in intimate or familial relationships. So what does this piece of legislation say? This piece of legislation says that the offence has to be repeatedly or continuously. So to get a prosecution under coercive control legislation, it can't just be one act. There has to be a pattern or series of acts, which if you think back to the definition that Lindsay spoke about at the beginning of the morning, it reflects that. The definition reflects this. And that these acts have to have or have had a serious effect on the victim. What does this mean? This means that it has to have caused the victim to have feared that violence would be used against them on at least 2 occasions. Note here that we don't have to prove that violence has been used, just that the victim fears it could have been used, that it would have been used. Or it has caused a serious alarm of distress, which has a substantial adverse effect on the usual day-to-day activities of the victim. So, put more simply, it causes the victim to change what they would normally do on a day-to-day level. The final part of this piece of legislation is that the alleged perpetrator must have known that their behaviour would have a serious effect on the victim, or the behaviour must be such that the perpetrator should have known it would have had that effect. We don't need to concern ourselves with that little piece of the legislation. That's for the police and CPS to look at. The things we need to think about are only the first 2 bits, that has it caused the victim to fear that violence would have been used against them or could be used against them, or has it had a serious effect on the day-to-day activities of the person being victimised by it. So, how do we gather evidence about this? It could be copies of emails. You may have emails from people victimised by this. Maybe things such as you can't come on on a certain date to do a visit, or I can't come to the office at a certain date. And if you follow that up, it could be that there is some kind of coercive control stopping them. For the victims, it could be that they have text messages and voicemails from their abuser. It could be that there is some kind of social media abuse or other kind of digital technology being used to stalk, follow, track, those kind of things. It could be that the victim has photos of injuries. I know we're there talking about more physical assaults than coercive control, but if someone does have visible injuries, then it's worth recording those if we can. It could be a recording of an interaction between the perpetrator and the victim, maybe even between the perpetrator and someone else, where the perpetrator's explaining exactly the kind of control they have. It could be records of interaction with services such as housing, yourselves, or medical, or bank. It could be that at the bank, the perpetrator's attempting to change bank accounts so that the victim no longer has a bank account in their own right, just a joint bank account with them that they have control over. Or maybe not a bank account at all in their own right, just a bank account in the perpetrator's name. It could be information from families and friends or neighbours, and then the people that are almost coming in and out of our daily lives, but in an almost invisible manner, such as parcel deliverers, milk people, postal workers, window cleaners, or contractors who are going into the house to maybe do some repairs. It could be about the repairs that we're seeing when we go into properties. If we quite often have the same kind of repairs to do, maybe damage to walls, maybe damage to doors. It could be a journal or a diary, notes that are kept by the victim. If we're asking the victim to keep notes, for them to do that on paper, sort of like the old-fashioned paper diary that they store in the house, could be dangerous. could also be dangerous for them to start keeping a journal on the laptop or on the phones, because chances are, if they're being coercively controlled, the perpetrator's going to have access to those. However, there is something that can help us and help people to record these things. There's a wonderful app called Bright Sky. Does anybody already know about the Bright Sky app? Has anybody seen it?
Yes,
No.
I've got it on my phone.
I think a couple of people have know about it, so.
Brilliant. Would anybody like to tell us about it? Nope. Okay. Nope. Okay. It's free. It's free to download. Once you've downloaded it, you can choose whether it looks like it does on the beginning of the screen here. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Whether it looks like this, a weather app, or you can change it so it looks like a calendar app. If you've set it up as a weather app, when you first tap on it, it does as any weather app does. It tells you what the weather is like where you are. However, if you press and hold, what you get is this second screen here, where it then gives you the choice whether you're looking for advice for yourself or advice for someone else. For us as professionals, if we click on Get Advice for Someone Else, it gives us a wealth of information there, such as safety planning, etc. I would strongly advise, please, if you could just download it, even if you just download it to have a look at it. There's lots of useful information on there for you. If you tap on Get Advice for Yourself, it talks about local services. Somebody's wanting to come in, I think. Is it Carolina? Would you like to unmute and talk to me?
Hi, sorry, I just have a question. We have some sort of awareness on our website regarding the domestic abuse, and when we put in the content about it, we were told not to promote this app because it could be seen by the wrong person. For example, the person that is I don't even know how to pronounce it, the person that is like committing the problem with the domestic abuse. So if they know about the app, they could see it on the victim's phone and they'll be not effective. So do you agree with not promoting on our website, or do you suggest we should promote this platform?
Okay, I'll come in first and then I'll ask Lindsay to come in as well. I think years ago, when we delivered training about domestic abuse, as we called it then, there was concern that by talking about control tactics, we would be teaching perpetrators new tactics. And the decision was made that actually perpetrators are pretty good at working out their own tactics, so we didn't need to worry about that. With this app, the beauty of it is that any information, if the person being impacted by the abuse is using this app to make journal entries, those journal entries are not stored on the app on the phone. They're actually stored in cloud storage, and they need to be, there needs a password to access them. I think if a perpetrator is so aware that they know what the Bright Sky app is, well, then they know what the Bright Sky app is, and they're very, very technologically aware. But I think a lot of perpetrators may not know about this, and sometimes it's about finding a way for people to record things. Lindsay, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit about playing the perpetrator at their own game. So, you know, we would never use this in any other way, shape or form, but we always use it in domestic abuse. So if we said, okay, somebody's got a broken arm, but that's going to offend the other person, so we won't treat the broken arm. We really wouldn't do that, would we? We'd go ahead and give what we can give for that person to get better. And this is what this is about, really. So the app is about saying, let's raise awareness as much as we can. It's been all over social media. It's been all over everywhere. We're trying to do our very, very best to publicise this, just as we are with coercive control. You know, if the more we make people aware that this is now a criminal act, and that this is a tool that they can gather evidence on. Like you say, it won't be saved to the app, it'll be password protected. So even if the perpetrator sees it on your phone and removes it, fine, you can just upload it on another device. You know, you can take it off your phone, you can put it back on your phone, you can take it off your phone, like I do with TikTok all the time. I can't decide whether I want it on or off, but it's always there, it never goes away. It's a bit like Facebook. So I would just say go ahead and publicise it, because you don't know you're helping.
Thank you. And so, is that okay, Carolina?
Yes, sorry, I was just saying thank you. We will promote them if you will recommend.
Thank you. I think something that we're going to touch on a little bit later, but I'll just do a quick sentence about it now because it fits with your question as well and the discussion we're having around this. The person who is best placed to know what is safe for them is the person that's been impacted by the abuse. They know their abuser really well. They've kept themselves safe for however many years it is that they've been with them. So if you talk about the app to somebody and they're then saying, actually, no, this really isn't safe because they check my phone 10 times a day, well, then they won't put the app on. But there will be other people who go, that's a really good idea. I think I can use that. And it's something that we used to speak about a lot when we were both involved with direct support work, Lindsay and I. We used to talk through a variety of options with the person we were supporting. And we used to open it by saying to them, it's a bit like a trip around a supermarket. We're going to walk around this supermarket with you. We're going to show you all these different options and you're going to pick the ones that you think best suit you and you're going to put those in your shopping basket. So it's in there. It's just one of the things that we can offer people that might work for them. Okay, thank you. Wow, we aimed for a break at 11 o'clock and look at that, we're spot on 11 o'clock. I don't think we've ever managed that before. So if you would please like to take a break, please make sure that you remain muted during the break. And if we could have people back, Lindsay, 11:15, have we time for 15 minutes? So yeah, brilliant, yeah. So if we could have you please back on screen and we will restart at 11:15. Thank you all very much.
So I'm just thinking for our purposes, really. I'm just wondering whether we even need the next 2 slides.
Shall we leave it?
Yeah, because I'm sort of thinking we need to, for their purposes, we need to get on to asking the question.
Yeah. So if I just do stay or return very quickly and then over to you.
Yeah, is that all right?
That's absolutely fine. No, I think you're right. Absolutely fine.
We'll just skip on to the next 2 things then. Right, I'll go get a brew and
yeah,
I'll see you in a moment.
A brew and a wee, and I'll see you shortly.
Shall I stop recording now?
I don't know how it will work with Zoom once you. Oh yeah, I think we should be able to stop and then start again, shouldn't we?
I don't know actually. It's not. It's just saying dismiss.
No, leave it. Leave it running then.
Okay. Okay, I will do. See you in a moment.
Hey, you've taken my presentation away.
hang on, I thought she's moved back.
I have, because I'm going to do 15 seconds just explaining that we're not doing it.
Okay. And then
and showing people the book.
Yeah.
And then I'll put details of the book in the chat. So if people want more information on it, they can do it.
Cool.
Okay. I'll take control back.
Oh, that's fine. I just thought, oh, hang on a minute, it slipped back.
We're nearly all. It's almost time to start again.
I think we had 27 and we've got 26 now, so I'm not sure whether just lost one person.
We lost somebody. Okay, good morning everybody and welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed a quick break and managed to maybe grab yourselves a warm drink or something. So, before the break, we talked about Bright Sky, but before that we talked about the work of J. Monckton Smith in recognising how vital it is that we all know a little bit about coercive control. The other thing that she did was she produced a book. Her research is called the Homicide Timeline, and she wrote a book about it, as I'd said. We would normally spend a little bit of time now talking about her book and her research findings and the Homicide Timeline. However, because we only have half a day with you, we've decided to skip through that bit. But I just thought if I show you the book quickly on screen, and then what I will do is I will put details of the book in the chat. So if anyone wants to do any of their own research and get the book and read the book, it's there, and it talks you very, very simply. It explains the timeline steps really simply in the book. Okay. So moving on from that, there are the timeline steps. Moving on from that, often what we find is that the question that we sometimes ask people out loud, but often have in our heads, is why people stay in relationships within which they're being controlled and abused, or if they've left, why they return. I'm getting many of us can relate to having that question around in our heads, particularly I think if it's family members that we see in this situation. However, what we're going to suggest to you today is that this is the wrong question to ask. Simply because this is why people stay. People stay because the abuser's power to harm is greater than society's power to protect. I'd like you to just think about that statement for a moment and see whether or not you can relate to it. Because I know when I first heard that many, many years ago, I thought, surely not, surely not, surely we do a really good job within society of protecting people. But then when you stop and think about it, actually, do we? Because the best support worker in the world doesn't work 24/7. The police officer that may take away the perpetrator and arrest them very rarely can keep them in custody 24/7. Even if a perpetrator's successfully prosecuted and has a jail sentence, unless they've killed somebody, they are in prison all that long and then they're back out again. If the perpetrator chooses to do so, they can stalk, harass, threaten and harm the person they're victimising 24/7. So, rather than asking why people stay, I'm sorry, I'm having terrible trouble with getting this to work at the moment. Rather than asking this, because it's the wrong question to ask, what we should be asking, and we touched on this very quickly before break when we were having the discussion about the Bright Sky app, what we should be asking, and we should be asking of the person victimised and impacted by the controlling behaviour, is what is their safest option? Okay. If we started asking people that question, rather than why they stay, do you think that would change your practice? Or would at least it change the way we view people that are victimised by this kind of abuse? Quite possibly, yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think, Lindsay, now we're back over to you with professional curiosity.
Indeed we are. So we've looked a lot at what we're thinking about. We've looked a lot at why people stay. We've looked at what coercive control is. We've thought about what domestic abuse is. We want to think really now about your role. And your roles might be many and varied. You probably won't all have the same role. Some of you will be working directly. You'll be talking face to face with people in your homes. And some of you might be thinking, oh, I don't really have much of a role. So we're going to do a little bit of a sliding scale, basically. Really good question. Would they know what their safest option would be? I'm just going to come back to that, Sajid, because I think it's a fantastic question. Yes, so there's nobody who's better at risk assessing your life than you. Do you agree with that? If I just came into your life and I've known you for 5 minutes and I say, right, this is what I think's best for your life, how would you feel about that? Would you think, oh, I don't actually know whether she knows me? So what we always say is there's nobody knows better than the victim. The victim might not know other options, which is where we're going to come in at now. So we're going to talk about how we ask those questions, how we open those conversations. What they might say, my safest option now is to stay because I don't know of any alternatives. But if you offer me some alternatives, then I will tell you what my safest option is. So a brilliant question. Here's where we'll go. We'll have a little think, first of all, about professional curiosity. And I'm sure you've heard about this because it's basically in every serious case review that we've ever done. Professionals are not being curious enough. They're not asking questions. They are very much procedure-led. So what we want to do is think about what does professional practice look like in your practice? What do you think it is? So I'm going to ask that question first. And you can come back to me with what you think it is. Anything on your ideas of professional curiosity? No. And I think it's probably different for different roles. It depends what you are. If you're the surveyor, you're probably looking more at the house, aren't you? You're thinking my professional curiosity is about why this house has got damp in it. If you're a housing officer, you're probably thinking about why has this house got holes in the wall. what you really need to be thinking about is the people. So how are we professionally curious with the people that we're working with? There's an expectation that any professional has the right to ask questions. So wherever you go, anywhere, if you are talking to another professional, you will always think that they have the right to ask you some questions. So let's have a think about it. The first thing we need to think about to be professionally curious, yeah, look, listen and asking direct questions. Thanks, Eve, that's brilliant. Is about being a supportive listener. Totally that. Listen to their stuff and not yours, which is sometimes we're going in with the agenda, aren't we? We're going in with, we need to talk about the holes in the wall. We need to also think about what's going on. So let's listen to some of their stuff. Also think about, it might not be what you want to happen, but actually what they need to happen, as opposed to you're here with an agenda. So we need you to think about, I wonder what it is that they need to happen. Help the speaker, help them to clarify their thoughts. And there's a really easy way to do this. Nothing rocket science that Sue and I will deliver today, but we're thinking about how you would enable somebody to speak openly. And we use this thing called TED, and it's been around for absolutely yonks, and they use it with children, but I use it with all adults. So basically you're having a conversation with somebody, they're telling you, and they're garbling on, and they're telling you all sorts of stuff, and this happened and that happened, and what, and I felt, and then this, and you have to go, hang on a minute. Let's use TED. So the T stands for tell me. So tell me a bit more about that. So it might be that they give you a little bit of information, you need a bit more. Tell me a bit more about that, because I don't know about that stuff. Yeah, tell me a bit more. Let me understand that from your point of view. Then the E stands for explain. Can you explain what you mean by that? Or can you explain what that felt like for you? So you're really sort of delving in a little bit here. And then the D just stands for describe. So can you describe who did that to you? Can you describe where you were in the room? What happened? Could be those sort of conversations. And you're thinking about helping them to clarify what's going on for them, helping them to get their account into a way that you can document, really. Okay? So that's really what it's all about. The other thing we ask you to do is use persistence. Now, this might be something that you do between you. So if one person goes to do a visit one day and then the next time they're coming into the office, it's really important that you have that documentation somewhere. And I think Prafula is going to talk to you about that anyway. But you have that record of what has actually been said before between this person and a staff member. You can then pick it up from there. It might be that they've got, excuse me, it sounds like somebody's drilling a hole outside. I'll just shut the window. Apologies for that, guys. We've got somebody moving in the house across the road and they're doing all sorts of work to it. So using persistence is really about making sure that you're asking the question more than once and that you are also giving a little bit of space for that person to answer. Now, this is really interesting, and I'm going to ask the question here. If you imagine that there is a female who's experiencing domestic abuse that lives in one of your properties, how confident do you feel about asking questions around how they are and how they're doing and if things are okay for them? Do you feel okay with that? And does it make a difference whether you're a man or a woman asking the question? I'm just going to ask that openly to you guys.
Well, I think it depends on the cultural background of it as well. The person you're speaking to, a female might not feel comfortable speaking to a man if she's been abused by a man.
Yeah. And it's really about recognising all of those things, because for lots of us, it won't really matter. It'll just be that you're the right face at the right time on the right day that's asked the right question. And it's like, okay, I can talk to you. So don't let it hold you back, but be absolutely aware and think, maybe I'm not the right person. Maybe it needs to be somebody else who asks the question. And that's why we always say be persistent. Ask more than once, or get somebody else to ask and see if they get a different response. These are really sort of simple, but keep emotional perspective. It's really hard not to get drawn in to somebody's life if they're telling you awful things or things that have happened to them. Yes, absolutely be empathetic and use that. That must be really bad. I can sort of see where you're coming from. Tell me a bit more about that, but keep your emotional perspective. You are there with a purpose to help. And then, of course, use positive body language. Really important is body language. Even on this medium, I'm very conscious of what I'm saying, how my body posture is. I often get told off in team meetings for doing eye rolling, so I'll do this when somebody says something. And it's dreadful, isn't it? Because you're on camera and yeah, there's me doing a bit of an eye roll in the meeting. So be very aware of your body language. Let's have a look at how we do safe inquiry then, shall we? So it's not rocket science, it's dead easy. The first thing you're going to think about is starting a conversation with someone, and we want you to keep it really simple. So it would be, how are you doing? How are you? I'm a bit worried about you. I can see that things aren't okay for you right now. Yeah, ask them what's going on. Can you describe maybe how things have changed since this relationship began? Is there anything that you don't do now that you used to do before? You know, what's changed in this time period that you've been in this relationship? So it's getting them to think about, actually, what is different? What is going wrong? You're then going to offer in support. So you're imagining that you've opened that conversation and they've said, yeah, things are rubbish, actually. This is what's going on in my life. And you're going to then offer support. First thing you're going to say is, what do you want to happen next? What do you want to happen next? Now, they might say, I don't know. Or they might say, actually, I've got a really good plan and this is what I want to do and I just need you to help me do it. And that's why it's worth asking the question, because they may already know what they want to do next. Here's what you do to help them know what they want to do next. So we've got 2 solution-focused questions. The first one says, okay, if you woke up tomorrow morning and everything in your life was good, what would have changed? That enables people to think, actually, what is it that's good in my life and what do I need to get out that's bad? So they might say something really bad there. They might say, well, do you know what? I don't wake up tomorrow morning. That'd be the best thing if I don't even wake up tomorrow morning. Or they might say, I wake up tomorrow morning and the abuser's dead. So you've got to be really ready for some of those answers, because it's a shocking answer. It's a shocking question sometimes for people. They've not had an opportunity to think it through. The other thing you could do is say, okay, you're telling me that things aren't good for you now. So if things don't change, what might your relationship look like or feel like in maybe 6 months from now? What about a year from now? Or where are you going to see yourself in 5 years? How do you think that's going to be? So all you're doing here is getting them to think about where they are in that relationship. Yeah, this is good, this is bad, this is what I want more of, this is what I don't want. Okay. Now then, once they've told you that and you've started documenting some of those things that they've said, you can start thinking about this bit. And really, it's not for you to do. This is about you passing on to the specialist support services. But what we're saying is, first of all, leaving a relationship is a process and not an event. It takes time. So if people are saying, yeah, I want out, I want to end this relationship, don't expect it to happen overnight. Next thing you can do is tell them that leaving or planning to leave that relationship is a very high risk time. This is a very dangerous time, and you know that because you've been on some training today to find out. So what you're going to do is to say, I want you to help you to do it as safely as possible. So why don't we look at a safety plan? Now we've got some superb support services that do the safety plan for you, and we'll talk about them in a minute. Or you might want to do some safety planning depending on what relationship you have. So we're going to give you loads of different safety plans in your packs, and you can decide whether that is something you want to do or whether you want to pass that on to a specialist support service to do. And that's a conversation that you can have with your manager. So it's as simple as that. We're not expecting you to do anything rocket sciencey. We're just expecting you to open the conversation, offer some support, find out what they want to do next, and then say, right, here's the support. What you have got at your fingertips is you've got a safe place. So you at Manningham Housing are already a safe spot. It might be that somebody is able to come to your office on their own. You're able to get them to your office and talk to them on their own in a room. COVID's been great for that, so we could do that. So we can only have one person in at a time. And you can then invite the specialist support service to come to your office and see the person there. So that might be something that you'd choose to do. If you are using the telephone still and you're not seeing people face to face very much, there's a very quick safety questions here that you might want to think about using. And it's dead simple again, scaling questions. So you've got an understanding that something's not right. You're having the conversation over the telephone and you just say, okay, how safe do you feel now? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I'm safe as houses, 5 being I'm terrified for my life, how safe are you now? They might say, I'm a 3. Okay, so what's the worst thing that you think is going to happen? I don't know, but I might get beaten up tonight, or I don't know, I might get locked in, or whatever it is. Okay, so what do you want to do? And what is your safest option? Okay, so they're just some very, very quick scaling questions that you might want to ask if you are talking to somebody online. Right, if somebody is planning to leave, or indeed if they have left and they've come to use one of your properties because they've escaped domestic abuse, then please be assured that you are still working with someone who is at very high risk. So at that point, I'd want you to think about your local support services, and we're going to go through them in a second or two. But what I would like you to also think about, and this you could use this personally as well because it's just a brilliant app, is the HollyGuard app. Now, is anybody aware of the HollyGuard app? Has anybody heard about this one before? Hopefully this is a bit of a gift because it's I don't think many people have heard of it. No, I don't think many have. So loads of information in your pack. We normally give you a little film clip, but we won't today. I'll just quickly talk through it. Again, it's a free app. You can download it. It's called HollyGuard app. It acts as a personal safety device. So imagine that I've got the HollyGuard app and Sue has got the HollyGuard app. And what happens if Sue's going out, or she's going somewhere that she's unsure of, or she's going out in the dark, is if she feels unsafe, she taps the HollyGuard app and it sends me an alert. the alert tells me that she's unsafe. When I click onto it, it tells me exactly where Sue is. So it tells me her location. It then goes on to audio and video record where Sue is and what she's doing. So I can then make a decision to think, oh, flipping heck, Sue's in danger. I need to go and rescue her. Now, at this point, Sue can send me a message saying, I'm all right, sorry, everything's fine. Or I can contact her saying, are you okay? And she can leave the app on, or she can discard it. It will also set off a personal alarm sound if you really are in danger and there's nobody around. So we're saying for people that have maybe moved away from an abuser, this could be really good, because this is when they'll be stalked. This is when they'll be harassed by the abuser. So it might be something that they download onto their phone. More about that in your pack. Any thoughts, comments or questions on that? I think it's fairly straightforward. Yeah, that's great, Sajid. Also, again, offer appointments when safe for them. Yeah. Yeah. People don't want to talk about it because they're ashamed, and that's the reason why we always invite the conversation. So you would never, it's very rare that somebody would just come into your office and go, this is happening to me. That's why we always say, let us invite the conversation. Let us do the, I don't think things are okay for you right now. Do you want to tell me what's going on? I want to help you. I want to support you. We would always be the one that asks the question. So yeah, I'm just looking in the chat facility for that. Thanks, Profila. Right then, my lovelies, let's move on to, we've nearly done, but let's move on to look at our local support services. I know you already work with some of these support services, but I need to tell you that they are amazing and that they are the best in the country. So, oh, I'll just let Carolina in. I think she's been kicked out. So, loads of info in your pack. Oh, that is amazing, actually. Yeah, so we've got also a point in the chat about stalking. Yeah, and it's really big. And do you know what happens? I think it's really interesting, this, because there's something about staff members also that don't speak up when they're being stalked. So I think it's a really good point, and I'm glad you've brought it out. If you are being stalked, it's really dangerous, and you need to go and talk to somebody about that, and you need to start gathering the evidence, because it is really scary and it can be really, really dangerous. So I'm always mindful that when we run sessions like this, we're often talking about the people out there that we serve, but actually the people here that sit next to us, you know, we need to make sure they're okay as well. We need to make sure they feel safe. So absolutely. And interestingly, a lot of the really bad stuff that's happened where people are murdered, they've been murdered at their workplace. They've been murdered because the stalker, the controller, the harasser knew exactly where they would be at that time. So are we keeping each other safe? Are we saying, are you okay going to car park on your own? Are you okay doing this visit on your own? Do you need me to come with you? Definitely a conversation that we should be having with each other. Please take it seriously. It's really serious. So thanks for that, Gary. That's brilliant. I'm just going to quickly have a look at these services. I'm probably thinking you know them all. You'll know about Survive and Thrive, which houses Staying Put and all our support services. What you might not know is that they are really, really keen to work with you. I know you have some partnership arrangements going on with them, but don't just use them for the houses that you share. Use them all the time. They're able to do safety plans for you. They're able to include you in the safety plan if that's how it needs to be. They are able to give one-to-one support. They're able to make people's homes safe, which we know, provide accommodation, which I know they do along with you. But they're also able to think about if there are perpetrators that want to change their behaviour, then there's a service that can help them to do that, the Maze Project. They've also got support services for children. So any children that have been involved in this, that have lived in that family, that will need some very, very specialist therapeutic work, then that is also available through Family Action. I'm sure you'll be aware of the domestic abuse car. That's a car that goes out alongside a police car. So if police have been called to a domestic at the weekend, this car generally runs Friday and Saturday night, sometimes Sunday night. And what happens is if the police are called to a domestic, then a little bit afterwards, maybe about an hour afterwards, the DA car will go out and it will be staffed by a police officer and also somebody from Staying Put. And they'll go straight away and talk to that person, talk to the victim, make sure they offer all their options, see if there's anything they can support them with. So that's available. You know, we've got a domestic abuse unit at the police. Interestingly, I don't know how well you work with them, but they've got lots of information. So if you are unsure and you are worried about the risk of somebody, you can always check it out with the domestic abuse unit at the police, and they will tell you not just only how at risk a victim is, but they might tell you how risky a perpetrator is as well. So for you as staff members, you don't need to be going there on your own. We've got, obviously we've got housing options that I'm sure you partner with anyway. And the reason why we're here today is because that new Act of Parliament that came out this year is putting a much more heavier and higher duty on housing. And what it's saying is we need to provide good quality, safe accommodation for anyone who's experiencing domestic abuse. So that's where you come in, really. Just to let you know that we've got independent domestic violence advisors in the GP surgeries. We've got them in the local hospitals. We're trying to offer support at the point of where somebody turns up at a service. We've also got a specialist men's support service for any men that are experiencing controlling behaviour, domestic abuse. We've got a support service just for them in Bradford, which is amazing, really. Sexual violence services, we've got also the best in the country, but Bridge Projects just around the corner from you guys works with all that, but they also work with substance misuse as well. And they do work with high risk cases. And we've also got Rape Crisis that do what they say on the tin. That basically offer support after rape. So all sorts going on. What's new in town is these guys. So the Sdap, Specialist Domestic Abuse Practitioners, are very, very new. They've just been around a few months. They're part of our team. And what they're wanting to do is come in and offer, excuse me, they want to come in and offer whatever you need, really. So they want to do direct work with whole families. They don't just work with the victim, they'll work with the perpetrator, they'll work with the children. But they will also offer you some consultancy. So if it's something that you're not sure of and you need a bit of support with it, they will come in and help you with that. So please look out for the Sdap team. You'll be hearing more about them. We're going to launch them this week on the 25th of November. So you'll be hearing much more about them. Okay, any questions on support services or working with them? Anybody want to unmute and speak? Anybody got a pulse? Have we bored you to death?
Hi, yeah, I'll just add on there that a lot of the support services that we already work in partnership with them do. So I know that our housing team do a lot of work with them directly. I don't know if Nadeem wants to elaborate on that, but I know that we already have worked closely with Staying Put, the Bridge Project, and some of the projects available, and group internally and through our sort of like Carolina mentioned earlier, our social media resources. We try to flag up certain things and signpost our customers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really great. It's the way forward for sure. And, you know, we're not expecting you to take on any additional role. I think what we really want you to do is think about where you're documenting any conversations that you've had. And I'm going to give Prafula a few minutes to talk about that because I think she's set up a different system now. What we're trying to do is keep a data set really of what's going on, how many sort of reports of domestic abuse are we getting, do we need to put more support into your service, and that's something that we will take on board. So what we really need you to do is to be inviting, asking the questions, talking to people on their own, making sure they're okay, documenting any conversations that you've had, and then passing it over to the specialist support, which I'm sure you already do. But I think it was just the documentation that we weren't sure of. But that's not a problem. We're not saying, you know, okay, what you did then. So I think this sums it up really. So we're saying, yeah, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you do know better, we want you to do better. And I think for us, the best thing that you can do from today is just make sure you're documenting those conversations and make sure that you are feeling okay yourselves, because if you've had a disclosure from somebody, that can be quite harrowing. You've got Prafula, which is great because she's your champion, but make sure you have a bit of downtime to say, this was awful, this is what they told me, I didn't expect that. And have that, you know, really sort of take care of each other as well. Okay, Prafula, do you want to come in there and talk a little bit about, let me just stop sharing that. That's better. Do you want to talk a little bit about the documentation stuff that you've got or not?
Yes, I can do. I've created a spreadsheet which will be saved on the OneDrive, and I will send an email out to everybody. And it's just going to be about reporting domestic abuse, type of abuse, and then if you can let me know, and I can then signpost it to the appropriate agency. Because we're not specialists here, but we can get some specialist help for the family as long as they're willing to engage. It will be on the OneDrive. I don't know what else I can really tell you, sorry.
No, that's brilliant. I think that's really all we would say. I think that was the only thing that was missing really from your stuff. I think that everything else is amazing. And you've always had a very good reputation anyway as Manningham Housing for as long as I've been around. I think for me, what I would say to leave you on is try and talk about controlling behaviour rather than domestic abuse or domestic violence, because you will have a conversation that way. Nobody wants to talk about domestic violence. Nobody wants to talk about domestic abuse, but all of us can relate to controlling behaviour. So if you try and have that as your conversation, I think that'd be really useful. Praf, are you coming in?
Yeah, just a quick question for what are the signs could be if a contractor or any other housing officer or any frontline staff with coercive control, what could they pick up on?
Yeah, and I think we touched on it a little bit. So it is generally that usual sort of damage to property, usually damage to the victim's belongings, we will always say. It tends to be that defined, you know, where somebody will say, oh, they just really lost it and went crazy and smashed the house up. And we would often say, right, come on then, let's have a think about what they smashed up. And it's always their stuff and not the actual abuser's stuff. So we've seen a lot of that happen. It will be things like, you know, when you go to somebody's house, they never have their curtains open, they're locked in, all that sort of stuff that you might be seeing. Why is that? Have those conversations, be professionally curious. That's your job, you know, be professionally curious. Body language is another big thing. Why isn't somebody having that conversation with you? Is it because they're being recorded? Is it because there's something in the house that's recording them? All of that. There's nothing, again, I don't think, rocket science about it. You will pick it up in people's body language. Why can't they speak? Are they looking for somebody else to speak for them? But yeah, very much a kind of damage to the house or damage to personal belongings. Again, it could be things like clothing, so inappropriate clothing. They might be coming to the office in flip-flops and it's 6-inch foot of snow outside, you know. Why is that? Have they not got appropriate clothing? Why? You know, so it's all those kind of things that you would be seeing. Do you want to add anything, Sue?
Yeah, just picking up on the Luke and Ryan stuff, if there are children around, overly compliant children.
Absolutely. So it's not always that thing that that's why we prefer to talk about controlling behaviour rather than domestic abuse. And it is saying, you know, what are the things you don't do? Why don't you do them? Did you used to do them? Why don't you do them anymore? What's stopping you? Caroline. Yeah, coming in.
Sorry to interrupt. I missed a few minutes from the session. I don't know if you covered this already. I saw on social media something called like domestic abuse and hand signal. I don't know if you already cover, if you will cover it, but I think it's maybe the colleagues should know as they visit customers and they see customers. Do you mind if I put the picture on the chat for them?
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, you can do. So this is what you would do if somebody experiencing domestic abuse and they can't speak to you, they would do this. Simple as. Sometimes you see people with a little spot on the hand that they would put up. And it's basically about saying, I can't speak right now, but can you help me? So if somebody does this to you, or if somebody's got a spot on their hand, that means that you need to get them to a place of safety so that they can talk. And it's been used all over the world as this hand signal. I think there was a really, really interesting case. I think it might have been in America where somebody was in a diner and and they did it. And it was really interesting because the lady who was serving them saw it and said, right, I need to go and do something about this. She actually got the police and she said, if you hadn't have done that, I might have been dead. And I could have been dead today. So you just never know how at risk somebody is. So yeah, the hand signal's brilliant. Thanks for that, Carolina. And I will give you a pack with loads of stuff in as well. Anything else? Okay, so what I'd really love you to do now, I know we've finished. I'll go on, Sue.
I'd just like to say, don't ever be frightened of asking someone, because people who are impacted by coercive control and domestic abuse, we're very good liars. We lie to our friends, we lie to our families, we lie to ourselves. So with the greatest of respect, if we don't feel that it's safe to disclose to you, we'll just lie to you. But if you keep asking, there might be one of those days where we feel it is safe to talk to you, and we'll talk to you then. Okay, is that okay? I think sometimes we become a bit frightened of asking the question in case somebody doesn't really want to talk about it. And if people really don't want to talk about it on that day that you ask, they won't do. But they will remember that you tried to start the conversation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so if you would just give us or indulge us with a little bit of feedback in the chat, that'd be really great, because we don't give you any evaluation forms. Just tell us what you thought of it. I'm going to stop recording there, I think, if I know how to do that. How do I stop recording? Stop recording.